Hello, I'm Tom. Since starting Mastering the Mix back in 2014, I've been helping music producers solve the hardest problems they face in the studio and create better sounding music. I want to start by saying thank you so much for watching this mastering video. I'm super excited to be sharing this information with you, and I'm totally confident that what you're going to learn will genuinely, dramatically transform your ability to master music. So look, if you've ever felt that your music doesn't measure up to the sonic quality of other pro-sounding releases online, you're not alone. Making music is really hard, and there are endless things to learn, from songwriting to production to mastering. So there are a lot of tips and tricks online, but these often just scratch the surface. Trying to compile all the useful and relevant bits of information together can leave you with gaps in your knowledge and wondering what approach to take. So, I want this video to fill those gaps and give you a clear direction when you master a track. I'll go through all the essential steps of how to master a song in depth, as well as additional processing that will help elevate your sound. We'll leave no stone unturned, so when it comes to mastering your own music, you'll know exactly what steps to take to get great results. I, along with every successful mastering engineer out there, was once in your shoes. I wanted to be able to make great sounding music that resonated with the people that listened, and for it to open doors to life-changing opportunities. And I was completely committed to improving this skill, and it took me on a pretty wild journey. But look, when I first started, I couldn't even give away my mastering services for free. I was DJing regularly at the time, and I can say that my first master sounded absolutely horrible in the club. But through intensive research, testing, practice, and patience, I discovered a repeatable process that actually gave me consistently awesome results. So I eventually turned these processes into plugins that now help loads of producers master their own music. But alongside the plugins, my ability to create world-class masters opened the door for me to work with chart-topping artists, as well as creating loyal customers who have trusted me with their music now for many years. I differentiate myself from most mastering engineers who give a track a few subtle finishing touches. So my process dramatically elevates the sound. My aim is to always blow the client away with the transformation their music has undergone. And my clients have kindly left me hundreds of 5-star reviews, and I'm always delighted to hear their success stories. My business is focused on plugins, but I continue to master music as I am completely in love and borderline obsessed with the process and finding ways to get a song reaching its absolute fullest potential. So some producers take a trial and error approach to mastering, and while this can be fun and eventually give you decent results, I want to teach you how to be a problem solver. Because being a problem solver will train your ear to be sensitive to the issues in the music you're mastering. Learning to identify the problems in audio using both your ears and plugins unlocks a new way to master music that's faster, easier, simpler, and will give you great results. So together we'll look at areas where a lot of amateurs and even intermediate producers can go wrong with mastering, and I'll show you how to actually avoid the same problems. It's also important to learn how to objectively analyze your own work so you can honestly determine whether your master sounds good or not. This self-reflection is one of the most important aspects of your growth as an audio engineer. Effective, critical analysis of your work will lead to much faster results due to more focused practice. This is a skill that takes practice, but the results speak for themselves in the end. So just take a moment to think about how it would make you feel if you could overcome this hurdle, this mystery of mastering, and create the music you hear in your head with authority. Also, there's an amazing hidden benefit that you'll get after doing a deep dive into understanding mastering. So knowing the process and potential challenges that you'll face during mastering will actually significantly improve your productions. Why? Because when you have the end in mind, you make better decisions at early stages in the production. For example, when you have a clear and defined idea of how you want your bass to sound in the final master, you ensure that you choose an appropriate bass synth in the first place. And this will always give much better results than trying to boost the low end in an unnatural way during mastering. Ultimately, after internalizing this information, you'll have the necessary skills and knowledge to create masters that will compete with pro-sounding releases. You'll see some of our plugins get mentioned. They've helped countless music producers get their music sounding amazing, and I know they can do the same for you too. So the downloads are available on our website, and we're going to give you some trial extension codes too, so you can use the plugins throughout your learning journey. Right, enjoy, and let's get your music sounding better than ever. The key with any studio setup is to maximize the results with what you've got. We don't all have world-class facilities to work with, myself included, but that doesn't mean you can't get incredible results. So this is my home studio. The acoustic treatment was custom designed by Art Novian for my space, and it cost me around $10,000. Decent acoustic treatment should be the first investment you should make when you want to improve your listening space, and therefore your decision making. So the speakers I'm using are Genelec, the ones, 8241As. These give me incredibly detailed imaging and offer, in my opinion, the best value to price that you'll find on the market. These are the best fit for my home studio, even though they're not technically mastering monitors. They're incredible and allow me to get fantastic results. They come in around $6,000, but so worth the investment. I use Sennheiser HD800Ss. They're open back headphones. These were around $1,600. They're incredibly comfy and allow me to work as long as I need without getting ear fatigue. They allow me to get really close to the sound I'm looking for. I don't miss anything with these ones. When you add in a full spec Mac at $5,000 and a $1,000 audio interface, my studio comes into around $23,500. It can be done way cheaper and it can be done way more expensively. As I mentioned before, the focus should be to maximize the results with what you have and then upgrade as and when you see fit. I won't go into depth with gear and acoustic treatment as it's outside the scope of this video, but there is one topic regarding the setup that needs to be addressed before moving forwards, and that's the level at which you monitor the music. So we hear frequencies differently at various volume levels. We hear less bass when it's quieter and more bass when it's louder. So I'm going to walk you through 5 steps you can take to calibrate your speakers to set the monitoring level suited to your studio space. This will help you get the most accurate response from your monitors in your studio every time you go to mix or master a track. Your ears will become used to the level you set, and you'll intuitively recognize when your tonal balance is off or the track is too loud or too quiet. So to start with, you first need to decide what digital level you want to mix to. If you're mastering audio for streaming platforms, you might calibrate to around -14 LUFS. If you're making club music, you might choose a figure closer to -6 LUFS. So now you'll need a pink noise file for the calibration. The pink noise file should match the level you chose in step 1. So the pink noise produces an equal amount of noise across the frequency spectrum. If you have an untreated room, you can restrict the pink noise to 500 Hz to 2 kHz to minimize low frequency standing waves and reflections. Open up a test oscillator in your DAW and select the pink noise setting. And you can use levels to adjust the pink noise to the ideal LUFS value of your future music projects. So now an SPL meter is needed to measure the acoustic sound pressure level produced by your monitors. You'll need an SPL meter with a C-weighted filter, which flatter than the A-weighted response, which is commonly used for general measurements. The SPL meter will also need a slow or averaging mode. These can be picked up for around $20 on Amazon. Some phone apps can be surprisingly accurate, so you can try that first. So now you need to work out at what volume you want to listen to your audio in your studio. 85 decibels SPL used to be a common suggestion for monitoring levels, but this figure was actually intended for larger spaces, such as a cinema. This level is close to the more flat portion of the equal loudness contours, a more accurate update of the Fletcher-Munchkin curves. It was later discovered that the method used for measuring the pink noise signal was slightly inaccurate, and the reference level for cinemas was changed to 83 decibels SPL. This level would be super loud and overwhelming in most home studios. So most home studios are smaller than 142 cubic meters. So 73 to 76 SPL C-weighted is a more appropriate target. So now we bring everything together. You play the pink noise file, adjust the monitors to match the ideal reference level for your studio. So let's say you wanted to master audio to minus 14 LUFS, and you had a small home studio between 42 and 142 meters cubed. You would want the minus 14 LUFS pink noise file to sit at around 76 decibels SPL C-weighted. To take the measurement, place the SPL meter in the listening position. Most SPL meters are designed to have the microphone pointing to the ceiling rather than the source, so you need to check the instructions to be sure. So now we set the monitor volume to its lowest setting using your monitor controller, or the actual volume on the monitors if you don't have a controller. And make sure your output and master fader in your DAW are set to 0 decibels full scale. And then play your pink noise audio. Increase the volume of your monitors until the SPL meter reads 76 decibels SPL-C. And then make a note of the volume so you can quickly set the same monitor level in the future. It's improbable that you will use this level 100% of the time. It's always useful to hear your mix super quiet to make sure the right elements are poking through the mix. You also might want to play your music loud from time to time, just for fun or to impress your clients and friends. So, you should now have monitors that are calibrated to a loudness that works with the size of your room and loudness of the music you want to create. You'll get a more balanced frequency response, which will help you consistently dial in the right amount of bass and mids and high end into your mixes. You can also use this new monitor level to help you find a similar level in your headphones. A bit of back and forth there is needed, and you'll need to use your golden ears, but it can be helpful. What is mastering? So stereo mastering is the process of taking a single file of a final mix and preparing it for release. The primary task is to adjust the overall loudness of the song and correct any tonal balance imperfections. It's also common to apply additional processing to enhance the sound as much as possible. Stem mastering is the process of working with grouped stems of a final mix and preparing the final bounce for release. Using grouped stems rather than a single stereo mix gives you more flexibility to change the sound and balance of individual channels within a mix, whilst also applying standard processing of stereo mastering. Stem mastering is preferred to stereo mastering when more significant changes are required to get a song sounding great. If the mix is perfect and only minor adjustments are required, then stereo mastering is totally fine. So when preparing a mastering session, begin by opening your digital audio workstation and import the mix into your session. Set the BPM of the project to match the tempo of the song. Most DAWs have a BPM meter, so you can identify this if you don't already know it. Load up the plugins you'll be using on your stereo output. So there are 5 essential plugins for mastering that should be present in your mastering chain in the following order. So you've got gain, EQ, compressor, limiter, meter. There are many additional plugins that can help enhance the sound that can be inserted into your chain. For example, stereo spreader, tape saturation, harmonic distortion. Your decision to use these additional plugins will be based on the mix itself and the sound you're trying to achieve. Then the final step of preparing the session is to ensure the file has enough headroom. So the headroom is the space between the highest peak of the audio and 0 decibels full scale. And leaving headroom during mix room is a good practice as it keeps the dynamics and transients of the audio unimpaired. When mastering, the headroom gives you the flexibility to adjust the EQ without pushing the audio too loud into the following plugins. So open up your metering plugin, I'm using our plugin Levels, then preview the loudest section of the mix and use the gain plugin, the first insert on the master channel, to adjust the peak of the audio to anywhere between -3 decibels and -6 decibels on your peak meter to make sure you have enough headroom before you even start mastering. Getting yourself in the right frame of mind will help you make better mastering decisions. Jumping into tweaking the tonal balance of the song prematurely without a clear sonic direction can end up worsening the sound. Listening to a song for the first time is a unique experience. If you're mastering your own song, then you won't have this privilege, as you will have heard the song many times whilst you're actually creating it. If you're working on a song you haven't heard before, take the opportunity to experience and enjoy it like a consumer will. Before you monitor the mix again, take a listen to 1 or 2 great sounding reference tracks that have a comparable genre, instrumentation, and vibe to the mix you're working on. The reference tracks should be a good representation of your sonic goal for this final master. Listening to these references at this stage will give you such a good frame of reference for what a great master should sound like before you start making changes to your master processing. Be sure to match the perceived loudness of the reference tracks to the loudness of the mix to make sure the comparison is actually fair. For the second listen, take a more analytical approach and make note of the aspects of the track that you feel need to change to get the mix sounding more like your reference tracks. Get a feel for how the low end sits in the context of the overall mix and how the balance compares to the reference track. Do the same with the mid and high frequencies too. By identifying the main changes you feel are needed, you've created a sonic vision and a clear target to shoot for. And this will keep your mastering decisions focused and efficient. There are many ways to approach mastering, and how you structure your process will ultimately be down to your preferred workflow. You can use the following advice as your foundation, but feel free to tweak the workflow to suit your style. Just be sure that your preferences don't hinder the quality of the audio or introduce technical issues. Remember, part of mastering is knowing what to change as well as what not to change. So let's begin with loudness. Your metering plugin should give you a LUFS, which is loudness units full scale reading. And this measurement gives an accurate depiction of the perceived loudness of the audio, as it's based on how the human ear experiences loudness relative to the frequency spectrum. Different distribution mediums have various optimum levels for loudness and decibels true peak. For example, streaming platforms like Spotify and YouTube stream audio at about -14 LUFS integrated, which is roughly 8 decibels quieter than the loudest releases you'll find in the charts. If you submit a loud and heavily compressed song at -6 LUFS, Spotify will turn it down to -14 LUFS. But the damage done by over-limiting is irreversible. So if you want to optimize music for streaming platforms, it's advisable to create a less loud, more dynamic master that didn't need to be turned down so much, and avoid the issues introduced by over-limiting. But if you're creating a master for club play, you may prefer to shoot for a much louder -6 LUFS short-term loudness during the drop or chorus of your song. A technical reading to consider when adjusting loudness is dBTP, decibels true peak. A true peak meter displays the peak of the audio signal once the digital audio has been converted into an analog signal that can be heard through speakers. This is more accurate and relevant in real-world use than the meters that you see on your DAW mixer, which displays the reading of the digital sample peak. often the sample peak is more forgiving, and your music ends up clipping in real terms when heard through speakers. So it's advisable to have a true peak meter to check this. Regardless of whether your audience streams your music or hears it in a club, knowing how to control loudness and true peak will empower you when mastering audio. The bad limiter settings can undo hours of hard mixing work. So our plugin limiter analyzes your music to help you dial in the best settings to master your audio, whether you're shooting for a super loud master or optimizing your audio for streaming. If you push a limiter too hard without optimizing the settings, you'll squash the transients of your audio and suck the life out of the performance. If you master your music too quietly, it will lack energy and clarity when compared to louder songs. It can also be difficult to know how to tweak the various controls such as gain, attack, release, link, and ceiling or output to work best with your audio. And understanding and setting these controls correctly is crucial to creating a pro-sounding master that translates well everywhere. Limiters targets help you optimize the loudness and controls to maximize transparency, minimize distortion, and get the perfect loudness. We created a unique algorithm that ensures maximum transparency and sounds brilliant with all genres and styles of music. So when using Limiter, you'll maintain the integrity of your mix and transients whilst effectively controlling true peaks. Let's look at how to use it in 3 simple steps. So step 1, load up an instance of Limiter on your master channel and select your preset such as Loud, Spotify, or Apple Music. After selecting a preset, you'll see the target ranges highlighted on the meters. The goal is to keep the meters within these ranges. Step 2, now monitor the loudest section of your track and click Analyze. You'll see a target range highlighted on the input gain slider, showing you what gain adjustment is suggested to achieve your sonic goal. You'll also see target arrows on the attack, release, link, and ceiling knobs, helping you optimize those settings to suit your music. Step 3, set the gain slider within the highlighted target range, then adjust the attack, link, and ceiling knobs to match the suggestions based on Limiter's analysis. So we recommend leaving release on auto for the most musical result. Of course, use this as a starting point and adjust if necessary. Hover your mouse over each control for advice on how the control will affect your sound. Setting the loudness before making any other changes to the sound has a number of benefits. It helps highlight existing issues with the tonal balance, it's easier to level match to your references, and you reduce the risk of EQing your master in a way that's incompatible with your loudness target. One of the most effective and reliable ways to elevate the sound of your music is to compare it to reference tracks that you love the sound of. When you A/B between your mix and the reference tracks, you can identify any differences and make adjustments so your master sounds comparable. Whether you have a high-end studio with monitors, acoustic treatment, or just a pair of headphones, if your master sounds comparable to your reference track, it should sound good wherever it's heard. The problem is, it can be frustrating not knowing exactly how to get your music comparable to your favorite mixes. So we created Reference to help you compare the original production you're working on in your DAW to your chosen reference tracks. If your mixes don't sound as professional as successful commercial songs, Reference will give you the tools and guidance to actually resolve this. So how does it work? So load Reference as the final plugin on your mastering channel. You can drag and drop your favorite songs into the user interface, then jump back and forth between your original and your reference. We recommend that you loop the chorus as a starting point. But before making any mix decisions when using reference tracks, it's crucial that you match the perceived loudness of your reference track to your mix. Your mix will be much quieter than the mastered reference tracks. The way we humans perceive sound gives us the illusion that louder music sounds richer in the low end with more clarity in the high end. This makes it virtually impossible to fairly compare the tonal balance of two songs at different volumes. So skipping this step can lead to disastrous EQ curves that butcher the sound of the music. So reference automatically matches the perceived loudness of your production to the reference track in real time, allowing you to make informed decisions when comparing the sound. When choosing a reference track, try to choose a track in the same genre that you're working in. Also, try to find a track with similar instrumentation and sounds to your production. There will be differences, of course, but choosing a reference track that is a great representation of your sonic goal will help you make the best decisions for your track. We've got a whole list of great reference track suggestions on our website, which you can check out. Once you've selected a great reference track, you can use the Trinity display in reference to show you how your tonal balance, stereo spread, and punch compares to your reference track. And we'll go into that in a bit more detail later. How the loudness of each channel sits in the context of the whole mix has a considerable impact on its individual tonal balance as well as the overall sound of the master. Louder sounds appear to have a fuller low end and brighter high frequencies. So for this reason, it's advisable to set the gain of each channel before reaching for an EQ or any other tonal balance adjusting plugin. By adjusting the gain first, you're reducing the range of changes needed when you actually come to EQ. A great way to start is to focus on each stem individually and compare how loud it sounds in the context of the whole mix in comparison to your reference tracks. As an example, let's start with the vocals. Jump back and forth between your mastering session and a level-matched reference track whilst focusing on the vocals. Are the vocals louder or quieter in your master? Adjust the gain so the vocals have a similar level in the mix in both your master and your reference. Use that as a starting point and adjust the level based on your preferences. So this process can be repeated for all the other stems in the session. By using a number of reference tracks, you'll get a broader average for what the loudness level of the stem should be. Start by balancing the individual gain of each channel, and you'll set the foundations for an amazing sounding master. Resonances infect your mix with their unpleasant and fatiguing tone. Even if you effectively tame all the problematic resonances on your individual channels during mixing, you might find that when you combine the channels together, more resonances appear. Now you ask yourself, can I remove these resonances during mastering, or will that mess up my sound? Resonance removal can be a pretty destructive process if you overdo it in the mix. It will start sounding like there's a weird filter making it thin, but you don't want to leave in resonant problems. It's best to resolve resonances in individual stems and then address any further issues on the master channel itself. So let's dive into the best approach to do this. So how can resonance removal mess up my master? Dynamically taming resonances is better and a more transparent approach than using a static EQ cut with a high Q. When you use dynamic processing, the attenuation occurs relative to how loud the resonance is. With a static cut, the cut is always present, which is like taking a slice out of your sound. It sounds unnatural and probably worse than the resonance itself. Another common pitfall is trying to fix more resonances than is actually necessary. As a mastering engineer myself, I'm working on a handful of tracks every day, and it's common to see around 4 to 8 resonances in a mix that would benefit from being reduced. Once you start going above 8, you're cutting so much from the frequency spectrum that you'll be affecting the overall character of the sound. So the third big error that can ruin your master is over-processing. This is where you're ducking the resonance further than is needed to fix the problem. This results in a hollow sound, similar to when you use a static EQ cut. So try to find the sweet spot when resolving the issue, so you fix the problem just enough for the resonance to disappear without any further reduction past that point. The final mistake is attempting to fix low-end resonances. Low-frequency audio waves are much longer than mids or highs. Consider the low end range is around 0 to 250 Hz, a total of 250, whereas the upper mid range is around 1 to 4 kHz, a total of 3000 Hz. A thin Q down in the low end doesn't affect the audio in the same way, it cuts a lot more. It can affect the punch of your kick and the richness of your bass. Try to start with great sounding audio early in the production process to get your low end sounding solid. So to reiterate, avoid static cuts, don't cut too many frequencies, don't reduce them so much that the master sounds thin, and leave the low end alone. So how can I identify resonances during mastering? So mastering is about fixing what needs to be fixed and leaving what's already great. You don't want to just start removing random frequencies in a hope it'll clean up your mix. So the best first step is to load up a great sounding reference track and tune your ear to what a pure mix sounds like. A comparable song with similar instrumentation and vibe is key here, as is level matching for a fair comparison. So fire up our plugin reference as the final plugin on your master channel and import your reference tracks. Reference's level match feature will be engaged by default. So loop the chorus of your reference track as well as the chorus in your own project, and you can jump back and forth. Pay attention to the upper mid-range, which is where the worst sounding resonances often lie. Do you notice any thin sounding spikes poking through the mix when you compare it to your reference track? If not, great. No need to fix a problem that isn't there. Move on to mastering your track. But if you do hear resonances, it's time to dive a bit deeper and try and solve that problem. So fire up Reso as the first plugin in your mastering chain. Now hold control as you sweep the mouse around the upper mid-range of the frequency spectrum. This will ever so slightly boost the frequencies where your mouse is, allowing you to connect your ears to what you're seeing visually. It allows you to quickly seek and destroy the resonances you can hear, but you're not sure exactly where they sit in the frequency display. When you hear a frequency jump out that sounds particularly bad, you've found one of the culprits. Be conscious of the tuning of the track and try not to focus only on resonances that are in tune with the music. It's completely possible that there are resonances in tune that would benefit from being fixed, so don't ignore them altogether. Listen for resonances that sound off-key too. So why use Reso over another dynamic EQ during mastering? There is a balance in filter design between various factors, including CP use, phase distortion, transient smearing, and pre- and post-ringing. So we spent a great deal of time researching and developing what we believe to be the most perfect achievable filter for the purpose of resonance removal. Reso's filters have a very near linear response with far less phase distortion than equivalent minimum phase filters. Also, for higher Q values, Reso's filters produce much less pre- or post-ringing of transients than comparable market-leading filters. So in this plot, we show a step response of Reso compared to a market-leading filter. The step response can be thought of as like how the filter reacts to a transient, such as a snare drum. Transparency is key during mastering, so Reso will help you maintain the integrity of your sound. So how can I actually fix resonances during mastering? So as you sweep through the spectrum in Reso and locate the resonances, double-click to create a node on that specific frequency. So the vertical position of the node matters. This is the threshold. When you place a node, you're basically saying no audio above this point for this frequency. A good starting point for the node position is to place it more or less in line with the top of the real-time frequency spectrum. From here, you can hold control to lock the frequency, then drag it down for more processing. The more significant the resonance, the more you may wish to reduce the threshold by dragging the node down. The Q bandwidth of each node is displayed at the top of the display. It's optimized to the frequency and automatically updates as you move the node around. The higher the frequency, the higher or thinner the Q. However, you're in control. You can adjust the Q bandwidth if you think it's necessary by scrolling up or down when you hover over the node. A broader Q is displayed by a lower number, and this will carve out a greater width of frequencies. This is where you need to be extra careful, as the sound can fall apart if you overdo it. Don't worry, I'll explain how to avoid overdoing it in the next part of this video. But that being said, a broader Q might be exactly what the resonance needs to be successfully remedied. So you can try it if you want. So here's a foolproof 3-step approach. So locate the resonance and double-click to create the node around the top of the frequency display. Hold Control and drag it down until the resonance is fixed. If you brought the node down significantly and you still have the issue, try increasing the Q. You might need to increase the threshold by moving the node up to compensate here. So how do I know if I've overdone it? Every producer on Earth has at some point gone down a crazy route and completely messed up their mix. Fixing resonances can not only save a mix, but also elevate it sonically in a super impressive way. Overdoing it will do the opposite and ruin your mix. So how do we know? How can we check and be sure what we've done works well? There are 3 sanity checks I carry out every time I'm fixing resonances when mastering. 1. Hit bypass, the built-in bypass. A simple bypass of the plugin will give you a clear indication of how you're processing the sound. It's a good idea to use the plugin's built-in bypass, as this will allow you to hear the audio continuously without a jump. The jump you get when you use the DAW plugin wrapper bypass button is the audio latency compensation being turned on and off. So hearing the audio without this jump really helps the brain focus on the tiny details, which is paramount when mastering. Level matching is often not necessary here, as the loudness difference of the before and after when fixing resonances is around minus 0.1 decibels. But be honest with yourself. If the mix sounds too thin or weirdly filtered, you might need to reduce the processing. So the second sanity tip is to hit delta. The delta is the difference between the input and the output audio. This allows you to solo the frequencies you've removed from the mix. The delta should sound horrible. It'll also give you a clear indication of how much processing is being applied. And the third sanity tip is to reference again. So finally, fire up that reference track again, jump back and forth, focusing on resonances. Does your master still have a good amount of presence and bite in the upper mids? Are there any resonances still to fix? So, conclusively, should you remove resonances during mastering? Yes, it can actually be incredibly transformative for your sound. Just don't overdo it or you'll wreck the song. Crowded, confused, and muddled are 3 words you don't want to hear when someone is describing your mix. But that's exactly what you'll get when you have conflicting channels fighting for space in your project. You may have experienced the low frequencies of your bass overlap with the kick, making it sound weak and thin, whilst robbing the overall mix of precious headroom. Or perhaps you've mixed a song where the pianos, guitars, and synths dominate the mid-range, making the vocals unintelligible. And using EQ to make the vocals cut through just made it sound harsh. You're not alone. These are problems that every artist, producer, and mix engineer have to deal with in every session. I'm going to explain an incredibly effective way of dealing with conflicting channels. With this information, you'll make the cleanest mixes of your entire career, clearing up channel conflict with more precision than ever before. So let's start by understanding the root causes. Let's identify why channels actually fight for space. So the clash between 2 channels in a mix occurs due to a phenomenon called phase cancellation. When 2 sound waves with similar frequencies meet but are slightly out of phase, so not perfectly aligned, they can interfere with each other. This interference causes certain frequencies to cancel each other out, resulting in a loss of volume and clarity in those specific frequency ranges. Imagine 2 waves, one peaking while the other is troughing, meeting at a point. The crest of one wave aligns with the trough of another, leading to cancellation. So this phenomenon is most prominent when the frequencies of the waves are close to each other. The phase cancellation and clashes between channels can occur in various situations during music production and audio mixing. Overlapping frequencies, so when two or more instruments or sounds in the mix have similar frequency content, such as competing bass lines or vocal harmonies. Monocompatibility. When a mix is played in mono, so a single channel, phase issues can become more pronounced, leading to cancellations that are less noticeable in stereo. Microphone placement. So in multi-microphone setups, if microphones are placed too close to each other or not properly phased, phase cancellation can occur when the signals are mixed together. Parallel processing, so using multiple instances of processing effects like compression or EQ on the same signal, can sometimes introduce phase issues if not carefully managed. Room acoustics. In recording environments with poor acoustic treatment, reflections and resonances can lead to phase interactions between the direct sound and reflections. Sample layering. When layering multiple samples or sounds, their phase relationships might not align perfectly, causing certain frequencies to cancel each other out. Stereo imaging. If elements pan to opposite sides of the stereo field have similar frequencies, they can interact and create phase issues, especially when summed to mono. This image shows the overlapping frequencies and stereo position of the hit song Uptown Funk. So notice how the kick overlaps the bass and how the vocals are set on top of the big synth. This is really common in music production. We just have to account for it. A wise first step when fixing clashes is to address the volume balance between the two channels in question. So if the supposedly submissive channel is louder than the dominant channel, then you're off to a bad start. So our plugin Fuser helps you analyze the relative volume of two channels so you can quickly tweak it to suit your goals. So step 1, load Fuser on the submissive channel. Step 2, sidechain the dominant channel. Step 3, align the input gain knob to the level match pointer. So this will set the submissive channel to the same loudness as the dominant channel. Step 4, you might decide to set the volume of your submissive channel a little quieter or move on to sidechain ducking to create more space. So let's look at sidechain techniques. So we want to create space in this crowded mix. Creating space in a mix through sidechaining is actually very straightforward. You identify the two channels in a similar frequency range, fighting for space in the mix, such as your kick and bass or vocals and piano. With sidechaining, you give one priority over the other. You might use our plugin Fuser on your bass and sidechain the kick, so the bass gracefully ducks out of the way to make room for your kick, allowing it to punch through the mix. Fuser is also effective on musical elements such as guitars, pianos, and synths to carve out space for the vocals, so they can be the focal point for your song. Once Fuser's sidechain is set up, you'll see frequency-specific channel conflicts glowing in the display. So at this point, you'll want to click the Resolve Conflicts button to automatically initiate processing that transparently resolves channel conflict and frequency masking without overdoing it. The smart node is fully tweakable, putting you in control. But to manually create a node, double-click the frequency display and then drag the node down to increase the processing amount. Adjust mid-side, cue, attack, and release individually. You can click the small triangle button in the top right to listen to the delta signal. It'll assist you in setting the perfect attack and release settings. Now let's go pro with mid-side precision. So in the digital era, mid-side processing plugins work by converting a stereo track into two signals. The mid signal contains the information that shows up in both speakers, while the side signal contains the information that is unique to the left and right speakers. Conflict becomes most prominent when clashing frequencies emerge in the same mid-side position within the mix. On the contrary, frequencies that overlap across different mid-side positions might not actually disrupt each other significantly. Keeping this notion in mind, we can precisely place sidechain ducking in the mid-side position where the clash occurs, while leaving the parts of the stereo image that aren't experiencing conflicts unprocessed. Fuser makes identifying mid-side specific clashing incredibly easy. So the mid clashes are displayed as a red glow, the side clashes are shown as a yellow glow. It's visual clarity for your mix. So with this information, you're empowered to set each node to a mid-side position that alleviates the conflict without unnecessarily disrupting the other parts of the sound. So at this point, your audio is roughly at the correct loudness, any unwanted noise has been removed, and the resonances have been controlled. So now you can actually start shaping your master. The EQ is a powerful tool that shapes the overall tonal balance of your track. With mastering, small EQ moves will affect the relationship between every element of your mix. So what do I mean by that? If you boost the high end to bring out the hi-hats, the low end will feel smaller relative to the high end boost. In addition, you can't effectively adjust the volume of any individual channel of your mix at this stage. So when you boost the high end to bring more presence to the hi-hats, you'll also affect everything else in that range, such as the very high end of the vocals, guitars, pianos, synths, anything and everything that bleeds into that range. You can do your best to isolate these various elements using mid-side or steeper filters, but that can lead to unnatural processing, so you have to be really careful. When adjusting the EQ during mastering, loop the section of the song that covers the widest range of frequencies. This is often the drop or the chorus. If you work on the verse where the drums might be quieter or the bass might not be present, you might overcompensate and boost the low end too much. So at this point, it's really important to keep referring back to your reference tracks when adjusting the EQ to help you set the perfect tonal balance. Mastering should be approached with precision, so each EQ adjustment will have a sweet spot that you may miss if you're 1 decibel off. The white EQ line in reference shows you the exact EQ adjustment to apply to your mix to get your music sounding like your reference track. This takes out the guesswork and helps you dial in a pro sound quickly, and you can adjust from that starting point if needed. Each production has different instrumentation and sounds, so it would be impossible to get the level line at exactly 0 decibels. So if the level line is within plus minus 3 decibels, this shows a very similar tonal balance. Anything above 6 decibels indicates a considerable difference in tonal balance. So use your ears and discretion here to determine if you want to get your music sounding more like your reference track, or if you want it to have a heavier bass or perhaps a brighter feel. The level line in reference can still be helpful here to keep you in an acceptable tonal balance range, but you'll have the freedom to shape the sound as you feel best suits the song itself. The low frequency range is particularly tricky to get perfect, mainly because most home studios don't have monitors that produce a good low end level, along with a lack of acoustic treatment. So too much of a boost in the low end and the master will sound muddy and lack clarity. Too much attenuation of the low end and the master will sound weak and thin. So our plugin Bassroom is an EQ designed to fix the low frequency balance when mastering. Bassroom analyzes your production and shows you the EQ settings needed to get a powerful and well-balanced sound. So to start, load up Bassroom on your master channel, select a preset or import your own reference track, and then match the bands to the EQ target suggestions. Then you can just tweak it to suit your preferences. The preset and reference analysis targets are 100% unique to your music. Bassroom analyzes your audio to determine the EQ changes needed to match the tonal balance goal. It uses a revolutionary algorithm that is based on how a human ear perceives sonic frequency. The unique filters in Bassroom are optimized to shape low frequencies during mastering, and you just won't find another plugin that can adjust bass more transparently, retaining the punch and clarity of your music, which is so important when mastering. When adjusting the EQ on the master channel, you would generally want to go for broad Q bandwidths and EQ adjustments no greater than around 4 decibels. So if the adjustments are greater than this, then you may get more transparent results by going back to fix things in the original mix before mastering. Of course, rules can always be broken, and it's the results that count. If a master needs a 6 decibel high-end boost and it sounds great, then just go for it. Our plugin Mixroom is perfect for dialing in a great sounding master in the mids and high frequencies. So it works in a similar way to Bassroom, where you can select a preset or load in your own reference track to generate tonal balance targets. You can also adjust mid-side settings for each band, giving you total control over how you shape the frequencies across the stereo field. When making EQ adjustments, be sure to adjust the output gain of the EQ to try and match the output loudness to the input loudness. This will help you objectively decide whether your EQ decisions are improving or deteriorating your sound when you bypass the plugin. Both Mixroom and Bassroom have a level match pointer on the output gain to help you do this quickly and easily. It's vital when you're EQing your master that you preview your reference tracks and the original mix often. Again, I rarely close my referencing plugin throughout the whole mastering process. It's a constant sanity check to make sure I'm pushing the song in a good direction. If I do something that worsens the sound, which happens, I know about it really quickly and I can rectify it. EQing is usually the stage of mastering that has the most significant effect on the sound, so referencing comes in particularly handy here. If you get stuck when EQing your master and you're not sure what steps to take, try this. So start by breaking the frequency spectrum into ranges, low end, mids, and high end, and then compare each section to your reference track and make broad adjustments to get your track closer to the reference track. Now focus on important individual instruments in the mix. So start with the kick. Use the EQ to get the kick sounding comparable to the reference within the limitations of the stereo file. Now do the same with the bass, vocal, snare, hi-hats, and brightness of the effects. If you still get stuck, it might be that your reference track is not the best fit for your song. This is a common issue, and taking a little extra time to search for a better suited reference track is definitely time well spent. All the techniques and approaches that I've just shared can also be applied when using dynamic EQ. So dynamic EQs give you the ability to add movement in connection with the EQ curves relating to the input audio. So this gives greater control over the tonal balance. For example, you could create an EQ boost with dynamic ducking when the audio signal gets louder. So this allows you to boost the brightness whilst avoiding harshness when the mix itself gets brighter, such as the introduction of hi-hats or a brighter synth. And you could also use a dynamic EQ to increase or decrease the dynamic range of certain frequencies. So you might keep the EQ node at 0 decibels and then adjust the dynamic band only. Boosting in the low end can give you a punchier kick and looser bass. Boosting in the high end can give you more transient hi-hats and maybe breathe some extra life into the performance. Attenuating the dynamic range of the low end can help control a kick with too much punch, or even glue the low end together. It's a super versatile tool, and you should consider it every time you make an EQ move. Let's look at some examples of when to reach for a dynamic EQ. So how about when you want to boost the high frequencies, but when you do, it makes some of the sounds too harsh. So here, you'd use a high-end boost that dynamically reduces when the signal gets louder. If you wanted to fix muddiness without making the master too thin, here you would attenuate the low-mid frequencies, but allow the signal to return to 0 decibels when the signal gets louder. How about when you want to boost the low end, but the kick is quite strong in the mix? So here, you would add a low end boost, but dynamically reduce the signal when the kick comes in. Not all mid-side EQs give you options to adjust threshold, attack, and release. So you need to be careful about how the dynamic elements are affecting the punch of your master. Let's look at mid-side EQ in more depth. So unlike traditional mono or stereo processing, which affects the entire signal, mid-side processing allows you to treat the center and sides of a stereo channel independently. And by isolating these signals, you can shape the balance of your stereo image, giving you more control over your mix. When used correctly, mid-side processing has the power to make your master sound wider, deeper, and more focused. When stereo mastering a song, you won't have access to the original channels or any way to rebalance the mix. But with mid-side EQ, you can attempt to isolate the thump of the kick drum, the bite of the guitars, or the sizzle of the cymbals, and give those frequencies a boost or a cut in the mix, depending on what is required to improve the sound. One of the most common applications of mid-side processing when mastering is to adjust the volume of the lead vocal. So the vocal sits in the mid channel and, depending on the singer, covers a frequency range somewhere between 300 Hz to around 7 kHz. So you can use a mid-focused EQ to adjust this range without affecting the audio information in the side channels in the same range. If you were boosting this range in stereo, you might make the synths in the side channels harsher. And if you were attenuating this range in stereo, the audio in the side channels might lack presence. The mid-side can be used for a plethora of applications in mastering. Too many to list, but the principle is always the same. With every EQ move, you need to clearly identify the goal, such as make the vocal brighter, lower the kick, make the synth sound wider, and once you clarify the objective, you can determine where in the stereo field the element lives, and apply the processing to either the mid or the side channel in that range. So as with all these processes, a quick before and after test of the adjustment is always necessary. Beginner producers make the mistake of not being subtle enough here. Mid-side processing is powerful enough to butcher a great sounding mix and totally destroy a well-crafted stereo and tonal balance. Your reference tracks will guide you here and keep you on the right path. Let's look at analog emulation versus digital. Should you use analog emulation or digital EQ? There are thousands of different EQs available for you to shape your audio. Ultimately, you can use any EQ you like to adjust the tonal balance. You might choose to use a super clean parametric EQ that cleanly changes your sound without introducing extra vibe or character. Alternatively, there might be an analog emulation plugin that you feel introduces a warmth that you can't get with other EQs. This warmth, character, vibe, or whatever you want to call it, is often just harmonic distortion and specific filter traits. So everyone has their different opinion on this. My personal experience is the following. So when I first started, I thought buying a ton of analog emulation EQs would dramatically improve my sound. And in reality, I was able to achieve my sonic goals faster with a digital EQ combined with versatile harmonic distortion plugin. So mastering is a passion, but also a business for me, so it pays to be quick. For that reason, I haven't used an analog emulation plugin on a master in years, as it can take time searching for the one that works best with your audio. But having said that, nonetheless, I'm aware it's super fun. It's a super fun process. So if you're feeling creative and you want to explore different sounds, then fire up an analog emulation EQ and have fun with it. The compressor will reduce the volume of the audio that surpasses the threshold. During mastering, compression is used subtly to control the dynamics, add color, and thicken up sounds. Compression on the individual channels should have been done during the mixing stage, so it's unlikely that you'll use compression on the individual stems. As with all things in audio, rules can be broken, but be aware that a compressor can exaggerate spatial effects such as reverb and delays, which could introduce an unnatural sound to the stem and overall sound. As with setting the loudness and EQ, monitor the loudest section of your track when setting the master channel compressor. If you set the threshold based on the volume of the verse, the louder chorus would push the compressor to work too hard, giving an unnatural sound. And overcompression is an incredibly fast way to ruin a mix. Squashing the transients can suck the dynamics and emotion out of a track and reduce the impact of a drop or a chorus. So to avoid this, dial in a low ratio of around 1.2 to 1, 2 to 1, and high threshold that gives only 2 or 3 decibels of gain reduction. So by only tickling the signal in this way, the compression will be transparent and subtle. It will maintain the impact of the dynamic variation between the sections of your song. It'll also help glue the sounds of your mix together, giving them a cohesive sound. So once your threshold and ratio are working well with your audio, you can tweak the attack and release settings to help the compressor further complement your audio. If your attack is too fast, it'll damage the sound of your transients in your audio, such as the drums or first few milliseconds of a bass. So it's important to preserve these transients to maintain an open and dynamic sounding master. Conversely, if your attack is too slow, the compressor won't react in time to the louder parts of the audio that you actually want to reduce. A great starting point for the attack of your compressor is somewhere around 20 to 50 milliseconds. So this leaves enough space for the short, sharp transients to poke through the mix without being so long that the compressor doesn't react in time. You can tweak this from the starting point and use your ears and reference tracks to help you dial in a setting that works well for your music. The compressor release is equally important. If it's too short, it can create a pumping sound, where the sound feels like it's jumping in an unnatural way. If it's too long, the compressor will be in a constant state of gain reduction, which again sounds weird and unnatural. So adjust the release so that the compressor returns back to zero state, so no gain reduction, just before the next beat for a transparent and musical compressor setting. If your compressor has a VU meter or any other visual, you should see the gain reduction dancing in time with the music. As a final check of the compressor settings, preview how the master flows from the verse into the chorus and ensure it still has a positive dynamic impact. If the compressor clamps down too hard on the first beat of the chorus, then you may need to increase the threshold to reduce that compression. So at this point, you've set the rough loudness, EQ'd and compressed your master, so it should be well on its way to sounding how you envisioned it. To bring out the maximum potential in your sound, you may want to add some additional processing to enhance the flavor, vibe, and character of the music. Stereo adjustments during mastering can help open up the sound whilst adding additional clarity and definition to the track. Reducing the width of 0 to 250 Hz so it's mono can help anchor the foundation of the track, reduce phase issues, and help it translate better on all playback systems. Increasing the width of the higher frequencies can improve the definition. So the stereo width display in reference shows you how wide the audio is across the entire frequency range of either the track you're working on or your reference. Understanding the stereo spread of both your original track and your reference will help you get closer to the sound you want. You can use panning in your DAW or a stereo tool to reduce or increase the width of a specific frequency range in your track. When using reference, adjust the stereo width of your mix until the stereo width visual is similar when you A/B your mix and reference track. The thing is, overboosting the overall stereo width of a mix can lead to phase issues, so be sure to open your metering plugin and keep an eye on your phase correlation meter. If the correlation meter starts moving too far away from +1, you could be introducing audible issues. Again, refer back to your reference tracks to try to get a comparable amount of width. The tape emulation and harmonic distortion plugins can be used to add subtle warmth and take off the digital edge of the music. They do this by adding additional harmonic content, giving a richer and denser sonic character. This can also hype the sense of energy in the master. Our plugin Animate allows you to dial in harmonic distortion to specific frequencies with mid-side precision. As with most mastering processes, the key with tape and harmonic distortion is to keep it subtle. Dial in the effect so you can just about hear the effect, then maybe slightly roll it back for a great starting point. The list of possibilities here is endless. There are plugins that can help you reduce harshness, control your low frequencies, increase the perceived loudness, add more punch, and more. So experiment and see which tools help you get the sound you're after. Revisit the limiter with all the EQ compression and extra processing changes you've made. So it's probable that the loudness and true peak will have shifted from what you initially set. So open limiter and levels, reanalyze your audio, and adjust to the new targets where needed. Remember to monitor the loudest section of your track, then adjust the limiter gain until your LUF short-term reading is hitting your target. And then lower the ceiling if you're getting those true peaks. What happens when you can't fix it in the mix? Give up? Or try some ninja skills to solve nasty problems in the master itself? You got to roll out those ninja skills. So I'm going to explain some incredible approaches that could dramatically improve your master in situations where you thought all hope was lost. The beauty of these techniques is that you might find yourself employing them with great success even when you could address the issues in the mix. Either way, these ideas will 100% level up your knowledge and authority when you come to master music, and hopefully get you out of some sticky situations. The main reason why fixing things in the master is tricky is that the processes you implement will affect all the channels in the range you're adjusting. So if you want to add an EQ boost to the snare in the 5 kHz region, you're also going to hear the boost in the vocal. If the vocal was already sounding good, it's now going to sound too bright. Mid-side, left or right focused EQ adjustments are the key to solving difficult individual instruments. So you need to first identify where in the stereo field the issue is. For this example, let's say we want to add more body to a weak sounding vocal. So step 1, create a mid EQ band. Step 2, solo the band and adjust the Q and frequency to identify where the low end of the vocal is. Step 3, boost the EQ whilst listening to the whole mix. Compare and match the body of the vocal to a reference track using our plugin Reference for extra marks. You can use this technique to boost or attenuate specific instruments too. The amount you can adjust by depends on the relative balance of the instruments occupying the same range. For example, you could boost the mid channel in the 500 Hz to 3 kHz to increase the vocal as long as the snare and synths in that range aren't too overpowering. I found that I can usually fairly transparently adjust the vocal level in a master by around plus minus 3 decibels before it starts sounding weird. Hi-hat levels are a common issue and can sometimes be very easily resolved. There are 3 reasons for this. Firstly, there are rarely any competing instruments in the hi-hat range. Secondly, the hi-hats are usually punchy and short, meaning you can dynamically control them without affecting the tonality or tail of any sounds in that range. And finally, they're often panned either in the mid or side channels. So put all of these attributes together and you'll find that you can use a multiband compressor to isolate the problem and fix it really transparently. Here are 2 different scenarios with equally effective solutions. Scenario 1, hi-hats are too loud. Hi-hats are wide in the mix. The solution is to apply multiband compression to focus on the hi-hats in the side channel with the compressor going back to 0 quickly after the reduction. Scenario 2, hi-hats are too quiet. Hi-hats are centered in the mix. The solution is to apply upward expansion to lift the hi-hats out of the mix in the mid channel. When you're mastering, try soloing the sides to see what's happening there. You can do that by clicking the side button in levels. Then head to the stereo field section and use the filter. Taking 10 seconds to do this will give you a really good understanding, both audibly and visually, of the mix you're working with. How about solving muddy or excessive reverb when mastering? If you listen to the master and you get a sense that the reverb is overwhelming the mix, you'll want to confirm the reverb's stereo position. The reverb might be in mono, in which case, sadly, there's not much you can do. When you solo the sides, like the example I just gave, if you hear a lot of reverb relative to the other details in the side channel, then you might be able to reduce it. If this is the case, do it this way. Go step 1, create a side EQ band. Step 2, solo the band and adjust the Q and frequency to identify where the focus of the overwhelming reverb is. Step 3, Reduce the EQ band while listening to the whole mix. Compare and match the reverb level to a reference track, again for extra marks. Resonances plague your audio with unpleasant, irritating, whistle-like noises. Removing them dynamically is the only way to do it transparently. Resonances come and go in the mix. If you use a static EQ and cut the resonances, then you'll leave non-resonant sections sounding hollow and weird. Use our plugin Reso to automatically identify the most resonant frequencies, then suggest an appropriate amount of dynamic reduction to solve the problem without making your mix sound weak or thin or weird. Transients poking through the mix too much? It can happen. It's often a symptom of when someone is monitoring their music too quietly when they're mixing. They boost the punch to overcompensate. Using a generic compressor to clamp down on these transients is a quick way to get your mix pumping up and down in volume in an unnatural way. Though this might work if you just want to take the edge off your transients by 1 decibels or so. So I have 2 suggested approaches here. So firstly, you could isolate the issue using a multiband compressor, like we did for the weak hi-hats earlier. Alternatively, you could use a specific transient tool, like Spiff or Split EQ, to bring down the transients of your master. These tools can be expensive, but pay for themselves once they've saved you once or twice. Introducing more punch into your mix is a little easier than controlling problematic punch. So a simple solution is to use the punch slider in our plugin Limiter. It analyzes the transients in your mix and uses a musical and tasteful algorithm to enhance them in your mix. For a more focused approach, you could use our plugin Animate to focus the punch on a specific frequency range in the mix, whilst setting the mid-side adjustments as well as other transient-related parameters. Noise and hiss can be cool. It can add lovely character and grit that gives the music charm and sets the tone. But when it's too much, it can just be annoying. So thankfully, it's a fairly easy fix if you have a snippet of the hiss or noise isolated. This is either going to be at the beginning or end of the audio file when all other instruments have faded out. If you hear it, you're good to go. So, step 1, load a noise reduction plugin on the master channel. Step 2, monitor the isolated hiss and click Learn on the plugin. Step 3, adjust the reduction to your taste. And then you rarely need to completely remove the noise. Often just a slight reduction can really help. If you have conflicting channels, kick and bass or vocal and music, you might be able to solve this problem using AI stem separation. Once you have the drums, bass, vocals, and other elements separated in your session, you can process them individually. Note that these stems will actually sound exactly the same when you combine them together in the mix that you uploaded for stem separation. So even if the channels sound a bit weird individually, any processing you do should still sound natural when you combine them all together. So the thing about this AI stem separation stuff is that it opens up a world of possibilities outside the scope of what I'm telling you now. But I wanted to include it so it can be a solution to an otherwise impossible problem that you could face. So what about things that you just simply can't fix? Overcompression and distortion. These are irreversible and burn into your track. You might need to embrace the sound and make it part of the character of the song. You wouldn't be the first if that's something that you do. What about bad recordings? I mean, a clipped audio file is a common one. I sometimes see during a vocal take during the chorus where the vocals just push past the limit and distort. It's such a shame as it really does stick out like a sore thumb in the context of a mix. Making a feature of it is a realistic solution. This means distorting the hell out of a phrase where the distortion is overloading, so it's hidden behind the effect. I digress. This is a mix thing rather than a mastering fix. But actually, whilst I'm digressing, another issue can be the vocalist being too far from the microphone. This makes the vocal sound distant. I mean, one way to fix this is to make it sound purposeful, to drench it in reverb so the vocal's more atmospheric. What about tuning and timing? So there could be a possibility of fixing tuning and timing issues using the AI stemming approach that I mentioned earlier. Without it, there's not much chance of resolving tuning and timing issues during mastering. More than a plus minus 3 decibels balance issue for individual instruments. So the mid-side adjustments I've suggested earlier in this video have their limits. There comes a point at which the adjustments are just too much and no longer transparent. There might be occasions where pushing past 3 decibels works. I've mastered tracks for clients where I've needed to push the low end up by about 10 decibels, and it works because everything else is relative to each other. So it's only possible if the kick and bass have a good balance relative to each other, but together are quiet or loud in the context of the whole mix. If the kick was a good volume and the bass was too quiet, then pushing up the low end would result in the kick being boosted way too heavily. What about file type issues? It's always best to have the high quality WAV or A files. There's no reversing the information lost from a lossy file such as MP3, AAC, or Vorbis, etc. So this is where you take a step back and look at the whole picture. Listen from start to finish and see if there are any aspects of the master that you feel need a final tweak. As well as comparing the master to your reference tracks, you should also see how it sounds against the original mix. Your mix will be much quieter than your master, so you'll need to level match for a fair comparison. This is a great sanity check as it ensures that you haven't made the master sound worse than the mix, which is totally possible. Our plugin reference comes with an additional source send plugin called RefSend. So insert RefSend at the start of your mastering chain to send the pre-mastered signal into reference so you can use the comparison tools and insights. Have your metering plugin open during this time so you can check for peak, loudness, dynamic, and stereo issues. So the final step is to export your audio so you have your new master file ready for distribution. You've worked so hard up until this point, it's important not to undo your work by bouncing your audio incorrectly. So start by select WAV as the option for high quality lossless bounce. The sample rate should remain the same as your original mix file and mastering session. There are no benefits to increasing the sample rate if the audio was not originally recorded and produced at a higher sample rate. The bit depth resolution refers to the dynamic range scale of the audio. 24 bits is the most widely accepted resolution for online distribution. 16-bit is the format needed for CD, and some online platforms that have not really adopted the 24-bit. If your DAW offers 32-bit, this will give your audio a more precise dynamic range, but otherwise 24-bit is totally fine. Dithering is a technical topic, but in a nutshell, it's only necessary to dither the audio if you're reducing the bit depth. So if your mix file was 24-bit and you wanted to create a 16-bit master, you would need to dither. If your mix was 24-bit and you're bouncing a 24-bit master, you don't need to dither. Normalization raises the volume so your audio is peaking at 0.0 decibels. You've already controlled the peak level using the output of your limiter, so you don't want to apply any normalization. It would almost certainly bring about true peak issues. Offline bouncing when mastering is usually fine and more time efficient for mastering. Real time can be useful if you want to have another final listen to your master. Once you've got your mastered audio file, you'll want to check that you're happy with the sound. There will be subtle or sometimes not so subtle changes that happen during mastering. So hopefully the changes are an improvement on the sound, but it's important that you check. So once you've got your master bounced out, listen to it in multiple locations. Check it on as many pairs of speakers and headphones as you can get your hands on. The car test is always great, as the acoustics in a car are usually pretty good. Many people listen to music in cars, and you'll have a good idea of how music sounds in your own car. Listening through smaller speakers, such as your laptop and phone, is also a great way to check your bass doesn't get lost on those smaller speakers. And do your best to compare your mix to other tracks, especially your reference track. Level matching is not easy in this context, but try to balance out the volumes between your mix and the reference tracks as best as you can. So while you're doing this, make notes if you feel any adjustments are needed and make the changes in your mastering project. Many producers repeat these listening tests in a number of times before settling on a final master, so don't be disheartened if your master isn't perfect the first time. Rinse and repeat until you're happy with it. It will be worth it. So we created an audio quality control application called Expose 2 that helps you identify issues with your music. So many tracks get distributed with poor EQ balance, true peak clipping, overcompression, phase issues, and more. So we want you to catch these issues before it's too late. Open Expose 2, it's a standalone application, so you won't need a DAW. Then drag and drop your mastered audio file into it. Select the preset based on your distribution method, so streaming club, CD, etc. And then any identified issues will be highlighted in red. The analysis feedback gives you specific feedback on how to resolve the issues and optimize your music for release from within your DAW. A great way to understand how mastering has affected your track is to load both your mix and your master into Expose 2. You can click level match to make them both the same perceived loudness, and then jump between to compare the sound. You'll also see the tonal balance differences in the EQ compare section. You can also do the same with your reference track. So A/B test the sound, check the tonal balance using EQ compare, and anything within plus minus 3 decibels would show a really similar tonal balance. And then above plus minus 6 decibels represents a fairly different tonal balance. There have been a number of audio products released in recent years that can help you check your tonal balance against other songs. The documentation of these other products always points to their display showing a peak average. Think of a spectrum analyzer slowed down. So we do things differently at Mastering the Mix. We created an incredibly effective algorithm that represents how the human ear perceives frequencies in the context of the whole mix. In this video, I'm going to explain how our standalone application, Expose 2, can help you analyze your tonal balance with incredible accuracy. With this information, you'll know how to zero in on tonal balance issues and fix them with authority and speed. So let's start by defining tonal balance. Tonal balance, in a nutshell, is how the frequencies in your mix relate to each other. For example, if the kick and bass are low in the mix relative to the other instruments, you'll have a weak low end. This makes your mids and highs feel loud relative to the low end, possibly giving an overly bright or even harsh sound. So in this circumstance, we might say that the tonal balance is weak in the low frequencies. So why is it important to check tonal balance? Now comes the tricky question. In that previous example, the tonal balance is weak in the low frequencies, but relative to what? Orchestral music often doesn't have a kick, and the bass instruments are usually low in the mix, so the poor mix might have a comparable tonal balance to a great sounding orchestral song. When we refer to a good tonal balance, it has to be in the context of the instrumentation and the genre. With this point of reference, we can set a benchmark for what is within the realm of good tonal balance. Possibly more importantly, we can identify when a track is outside that realm. Mix buzzwords like harshness, boxiness, brightness, and boominess can be explained in real terms through this technical analysis. After identifying a tonal balance issue, you can fix it quickly. And this is why it's important to check your tonal balance both during production and once you're ready to actually release the track. If you want to check your tonal balance during production, I recommend that you check out our plugin reference. So what is Compare EQ in Expose 2? Compare EQ shows how your average tonal balance compares to your imported reference track, or you can select one of our genre-specific presets, all of which were created using sonic profiles from commercially successful tracks. And this will allow you to check that your music aligns with your sonic goals, isn't too muddy, dull, thin, or harsh before releasing. Now let's have a look at how we can use this. So to begin, import your own reference track or select one of the presets. The algorithm automatically analyzes the tonal balance of the loudest sections of your music, usually the choruses, as these sections are the best representation of the full frequency spectrum. To import a reference track, click the current preset in the top left corner of the Compare EQ section. This will open the preset folder. The arrow is pointing to this in the picture. Drop the reference track in the top section or browse files. Click Default above Star Engineers in the left panel of the preset panel, and then click Reference Track. So at this point, now you are comparing your loaded tracks in Exposed to your imported reference track. So drag and drop your audio file into the main window of Exposed to. Analysis is complete in a few seconds, and you'll see an EQ curve in the display of the Compare EQ window. So choosing a reference track or preset. Algorithms are only as intelligent as the entry data. If you use an awful sounding reference track or choose an irrelevant preset, you might get mixed results. All tracks have different instrumentation arrangements, so for the best results, load up a reference track that is comparable to your production and represents your sonic goals. It's worth spending some time finding a great sounding track that matches some of your sound and arrangement choices. It doesn't have to be perfect. Interpreting the EQ curve. So positive readings show that your track has more perceived volume in those frequencies. Negative readings show that your track has less perceived volume in those frequencies. Now, note the scale on the left side of the Compare EQ display. This can either be plus minus 5, 10, 15, or 20 decibels. When analyzing your production against a reference track or preset, anything within plus minus 3 decibels represents a very similar tonal balance. This slight variation allows wiggle room for all the possible sonic choices available for each individual song, from synth sounds to samples, or whether it's a male or female vocalist. Anything greater than plus minus 6 decibels would represent a considerable difference in tonal balance, and you might want to make adjustments if you want to get closer to that sound. Exposed to level matches the audio prior to creating the tonal balance curve, so loudness is not a factor. This makes the comparison fair and relevant in all circumstances. Here's an example. Compare EQ shows 0 to 500 Hz is around minus 5 decibels, and 500 Hz to 20 kHz are all within plus minus 3 decibels. So this means that the track loaded in Exposed to has less low end than in your imported reference track. To fix this, you could add a 5 decibel boost to your kick and bass in your project. So this is some pro-level mid-side analysis. You have the option to compare the EQ balance of the stereo, mid, or side channels. Understanding how to dial in a great EQ balance in the mid and side channels independently will help you create wide mixes with a solid foundation that sound more like your reference tracks. So click the mid, side, stereo buttons to jump between the different views. You might notice that stereo and mid are often very similar to each other, and side has the potential to be wildly different from the stereo balance. Where the EQ line is below 0 decibels with side selected, that shows that your track is less wide in those frequencies. As long as your track doesn't have phase issues introduced by too much widening, it's down to your discretion about how wide, or not, you want your mix to be. How about getting a consistent tonal balance when mastering a collection of songs? So Compare EQ is very useful for seeing how the tonal balance of a number of songs stack up against each other. So, if you're mastering an EP or an album, or you want continuity between the singles you release, you can load the audio files into Exposed to, and you'll see the tonal balance of each song layered on top of each other. So here you'll see if there are any songs that stick out. Perhaps one has a particularly strong low end, or a channel that elevates the mids. You might have an acoustic track with little to no low end that gives a different shape from the rest of the track, so you can give that one a break. Using the plus minus 3 decibel rule, again here, can work well. If the EQ lines for individual songs follow the same shape, you'll have a consistent tonal balance across the songs. Outside of this range shows that the tonal balance across the different songs has a much greater variation. It's then up to you if you decide that's what you're looking to achieve or you feel you should make some changes. Most producers that have plateaued with their abilities don't actually know what's wrong with their sound, because if they did, they would just fix it. So how do we actually identify problems in a master? First, we have to tune our ears to what a correct master sounds like. And this means finding a reference track to compare your song to. You might be thinking, I've heard this a million times. It's got to be the same genre, same vibe, same instrumentation, etc. Well, yes to all of those, but we're going to go into a bit more depth here. So not only is the choice of reference track absolutely critical, but you have to know that reference track inside out. What does that mean? You need to know how it relates to other tracks in the same genre. For example, is it brighter than other comparable tracks? How loud are the drums, the bass, and the vocal in the context of the mix? So to do this, fire up at least 3 tracks that would all work as reference tracks for your song. You can do this in your DAW if you wish. I like to analyze audio in our quality control application Expose 2, as it gives me all the technical details of each track, allows me to accurately level match all the tracks instantly, and also gives me tonal balance analysis. So jump between your reference track and the level match tracks, focus on one thing at a time. So for balance, is the kick in your track louder or quieter than the other tracks? Is the bass in your track louder or quieter than the other tracks? Is the snare louder or quieter than the other tracks? And the hi-hats, are they louder or quieter? Are the vocals in your track louder or quieter? It's all of those individual elements are really important, and understanding how they sit in the context of the mix is super important. So tonal balance, how does the sub compare to the other tracks? How does the low end compare to the other tracks? How do the mids compare to the other tracks? And of course the high end as well. How does that compare to the other tracks in the context of the mix? It's much easier to assess that when everything's level matched. So this means that when you're using your reference track and comparing to your own track, you can keep in mind that, for example, your reference track is on the brighter side compared to other similar tracks, or the kick is actually a touch louder. So now you have your reference track and you know it inside out. You can use it to critically assess your work. I'm going to break down the most common problems found in any mix and show you how to listen for them. So to set this up, drop your master into Expose as well as the reference track. Click Loudness Match. Short-term LUFS at -14 is best for this. Open Compare EQ, click the preset menu, and then import the reference track there. This will mean that the tonal balance of your track will be compared to the reference track in the Compare EQ section. It should look like this, with the loaded reference track showing a flat line across 0 decibels, showing that the tonal balance is exactly the same because it's being compared to the same track. Simply getting a great volume for each channel relative to all the other channels is the first step to a pro-sounding mix, which then leads on to a pro-sounding master. So go through each channel in your head and compare the volume to the reference track. You can make a list that might look something like this. So changes I need to make. Kick, that needs to go up by 2.5 decibels. The bass needs to come down by 1 decibel, and vocals up 1 decibel, etc. So a lot of masters suffer from overcompression, overlimiting, and this makes them sound distorted and can reduce the punchiness they had in the mix. So take a look at the loudness figures of both your master and your reference track. How do they compare? Take a look at the dynamic range figure for both tracks. If yours is lower, it could be less punchy. So if this is what you're experiencing, you could fix these issues. To fix these issues, you could decrease the input volume of your limiter, increase the attack of your limiter, increase the threshold of your compressor, or decrease the ratio of your compressor. Balancing the individual loudness of each channel, as we did in step 1, will help your overall tonal balance, but sometimes EQ is necessary to elevate the sound. So for this part, we'll be using the Compare EQ feature in Expose 2. The EQ Compare feature enables you to evaluate the tonal balance of your mix against your chosen reference track. This powerful tool ensures that your tracks meet your desired sonic objectives by identifying any unwanted characteristics such as muddy, dull, thin, or harsh sounds, allowing you to perfect them before releasing the track. A positive reading on the EQ curve indicates that the corresponding frequency has a higher perceived volume, while a negative reading implies a lower perceived volume in that frequency range. The left side scale of Compare EQ, it can be either plus minus 5, 10, 15, or 20 decibels. When analysing your production against a reference track or preset, any tonal balance within plus minus 3 decibels signifies a very similar tonal balance. This slight variation allows for flexibility in sonic choices such as selecting synth sounds, samples, even male or female vocal ranges. When comparing your mix to the reference track, focus on individual frequency ranges. Use Compare EQ to back up what you're listening to. So, for example, you could ask yourself, should my low frequencies be louder or quieter? Should I increase the volume of the kick and bass or apply EQ? Should my mid frequencies be louder or quieter? Should I increase the volume of the instruments in that range or apply EQ? Should my high frequencies be louder or quieter? Should I increase the volume of the instruments or apply EQ? As I mentioned before, when mastering, stereo enhancements should be subtle and non-destructive. It's a classic rookie mistake that I've seen a million times. A producer over-applies stereo widening using a cheap and destructive plugin that destroys the stereo correlation. Here are a few objective rules to follow when applying stereo widening during mastering. So, try, if you can, to keep the sub-frequencies mono, 0 Hz to around 100, 250 Hz. People debate about the upper limit. I usually mono everything below about 150 Hz. Use a non-destructive plugin to boost the sides. Check you're not introducing phase issues using a correlation meter. See our plugin levels, which can help you analyze that. When the correlation meter goes past the halfway mark in levels, it warns you that your mix has phase issues. As a pro tip, Expose 2 allows you to compare the side tonal balance of your master to your reference track. To get the side channels sounding comparable to your reference track, apply the inverted EQ curve to your track only in the sides. Establishing a consistent routine is essential to improving a skill because it helps to create a habit, allowing for regular practice, it tracks progress, increases confidence, and it just reinforces learning. You'll need to show up regularly if you expect to see dramatic improvement. So, if you're a hobbyist or you don't have loads of time to dedicate to music production, then these tips will be super helpful to squeeze out all of the possible potential in your music. Again, if you can, seek out feedback on your mixes from other music producers or even friends with a good ear for good music. That'll help. Running an online studio isn't easy. Finding new clients, converting them to paying customers, and implementing systems that allow you to deliver an exceptional experience is a constant grind for all studio owners. I'm going to share with you my approach to running a successful online studio business. Whether you're making $25 or $25,000 per month, take 10 minutes watching this to learn something new you can implement in your business to grow that figure. So why trust me? My company, Mastering the Mix, has been fine-tuned to turn new visitors into loyal customers, often exceeding $100,000 in monthly revenue. Whilst the majority of the products are digital, the same principles have worked extremely well for my mastering services. Hopefully, you'll find several valuable insights that you can put into action in your business to improve your conversions, income, and customer satisfaction. Let's start with mindset and motivation. There is a lot of competition in the online studio landscape. To succeed, you'll need more energy and determination than other people fighting for the same thing. Learning how to capture the attention of potential clients and convert them into loyal customers takes months, if not years. If you're not ready for the grind, then this might not be the profession for you. Don't wait for your business to grow naturally, and don't make excuses about having no time. Don't even think about blaming others or external factors for your mistakes and shortcomings. Instead, make time to proactively grow your business. Identify and address areas in your business that could be improved. Be confident, driven, and deliver the best you can to every project. I've read hundreds of business books that have helped me grow my business. Here are my must-read recommendations. $100 Million Offers, Alex Hormozy. The Go-Giver, Bob Burg. The Compound Effect, Darren Hardy. Start With Why, Simon Sinek. To Sell Is Human, Daniel H. Pink. The Secrets of Closing the Sale, Zig Ziglar. And The Ultimate Sales Machine, Chet Holmes. Skip these books at your own cost. Reading is one of the best investments you can make, and my income has increased by no less than 1,000% since I started reading business books. Let's move on to skills and ability. There are many talented producers and audio engineers out there. To compete, you'll have to have the knowledge and tools to deliver world-class results. The thing is, if you don't deliver excellent results, you'll end up with unhappy clients who will never work with you again and advise their friends to avoid your services. Any efforts on improving other aspects of your business will produce lasting results if your service is fundamentally flawed. So how can you be sure you're delivering top quality results? Comparing your finished tracks to great sounding reference track is a fail-safe way to judge your work. Follow these 2 simple rules. 1. Make sure you've done everything in your power to bring out the absolute best with the audio file the client has sent you. I always have their original bounce loaded into reference to make sure that my work sounds better than what they sent me. Again, level match, to be honest with yourself. Okay, number 2 is don't send the master back to the client unless I'm 100% happy. I need to be 100% sure the improvement in the sound will impress them. I don't want to just crank up the limiter and impress them with loudness, so I empower them to conduct a fair comparison themselves. So I send the client their files using BounceBoss, which is a file sharing platform that I created to allow the client to jump back and forth seamlessly between the original mix that they sent me and the master, level matched. Hearing the improvement in sound gives them confidence in their decision to work with me, making them more likely to return. So, what about communication and service? Many businesses rely on repeat customers to keep their income steady. An online studio is no different. So here are 3 incredibly effective ways to keep a client coming back time and time again. Firstly, consistently deliver exceptional sound quality. Secondly, over-deliver on your promise. Here's a simple way you can over-deliver. If you can have the project finished in 3 days, tell them it will be ready in 4 days. When it arrives 24 hours earlier than expected, it will be a pleasant surprise for them. If you had told them that the finished version would be ready in 2 days and you sent it on day 3, there's a good chance they'd be frustrated and disappointed. You can over-deliver on your promise in all aspects of your service. If you include 2 rounds of revisions, throw in the 3rd free of charge. If you charge extra for additional bounces, then waive the fee. Do what you can to give clients that little bit extra to increase your repeat customer rate. So, thirdly, maintain professionalism. Without exception. Professionalism means bringing your best to every project. It means listening to the client's needs and managing expectations. It means communicating promptly and politely. It means leaving your ego out of the conversation and never losing your cool. 99% of your projects should result in your client asking you where they can leave you a 5-star review. If that's not the case, you need to up your game, improve your quality of your work, and start over-delivering. There's no doubt that at some point you'll come across a difficult client that tests your patience. When this happens, keep your cool. If a customer is rude, responding similarly will escalate hostilities. Listen. Understand their complaint fully to begin smoothing things over. Own your mistakes, whether the complaint is legitimate or not, is irrelevant. If you want them to stay a customer, you need to express an apology for the problem. And you need to find a solution. Once you understand why the customer is unhappy, offer a solution. Ask them what they feel should be done, or put forward your own fair and realistic answer to whatever the problem is. This approach allows you to fully understand their goals. It can turn nightmare clients into loyal customers that you want to work with again. Let's do a quick overview on positioning, branding, and pricing. So when I started my online studio service, I was offering mixing and stereo mastering, stem mastering, vocal recording, production, audio restoration, and anything else I could think of. While this initially broadened my scope for generating income, it didn't position me as a specialist. So after landing a few high-profile electronic music stem mastering jobs, I doubled down on this and made that the focus of my mastering copy. The market decides your niche. If I was consistently getting hired to master rock projects, then that's the direction I would have gone in. So, presenting yourself as an expert in a niche makes it more likely that you'll land paid gigs. This is because potential customers think they'll get a better result if they hire a specialist in their genre rather than a generalist, and they're often right. Removing the services that you rarely get hired for from your website also brings focus to people visiting your website. It reduces distraction and choice, meaning you'll convert more people. So the next thing to think about is, who are you serving? The branding and message need to resonate with the people that you want as customers. A serious artist wouldn't trust someone with no website who charges $100 for a full mix. But a hobbyist might be scared off by an impressive studio picture and high rates and the rest of it. So picture your ideal client. What's their age, income, goals, lifestyle, genre? What stage are they at in their music career? Your website should speak directly to that one customer. Follow this advice and you'll find yourself with more clients that you want to work with. So now you've got to think about what to charge. So your pricing depends on your personal preference and current workload. If you want more projects, charge less. If you're oversubscribed, it's time to increase your rates. It's important to find the sweet spot range that works for your ideal customers as well. If you drop your price too low, you'll lose credibility. Hike the prices too much, and you won't get hired at all. Stereo mastering, for example, can cost anything from $0 to $250, $275. I charge anything from $90 to $250 for a stereo master, depending on my current workload. Charging per project as opposed to per hour adds benefits to both yourself and your client. If you charge per hour, you're incentivized to take longer as you get less money if you're efficient. It also fixes a rate for your customer so they don't get any surprise charges, which can lead to a loss of trust. Let's look at what workflows, systems, and processes you can implement. So when time is money, efficiency is key. Implementing systems that improve your ability to work fast, communicate effectively, and deliver a quality experience will dramatically increase your earning capabilities. There are 2 tools that I have co-created and use every day that present me as an organized professional and ensure I deliver a world-class experience. So my clients send me their files and project details using BounceBoss. In the email, I get a visual of the waveform so I can immediately respond to any glaring issues, such as if the client has sent a mix with heavy limiting or compression. This allows me to message them back immediately rather than having to wait until I'm back at my desk, downloaded the file, loaded it back into my DAW, and then messaged them back. We then use BounceBoss for the entire collaboration process. Keeping the files and notes in one place means I don't have to search for emails, texts, go through Dropbox, download folders, etc. for files, comments, and the rest of it. It also allows the client to communicate effectively with clickable timestamps and loops. This clearer and faster way to give feedback means we finish the project with fewer revisions. They can also jump seamlessly between the different versions of their track to ensure positive progress. And when you empower the customer to make informed decisions about their music, it builds their trust in you as their go-to engineer. You can also build trust by never sending a file with errors. So, I use my quality control application Expose to help catch technical issues before I send a file. It literally only takes 3 seconds, and it saved me more times than I care to admit. Is the track clipping? Has the audio cut off during the second half? Are there phase issues? Is it too quiet? Did I remember to disengage my speaker correction plugin? We're all human. We make mistakes. Expose makes sure your clients don't suffer because of it. Other ways to improve your efficiency: use DAW templates, autosave and backup projects, create a new version of the project at each revision stage, save common email responses so you can reuse them, create a to-do list with deadline dates, automate time-consuming activities like accounting, invoicing, whatever. Read your DAW and plugin manuals. Understand your tools so you get results faster. Focus on what gives you results. Don't be a busy fool changing things that don't need to be changed. Delegate low-value tasks like session prep, clean the studio, so you can focus on the high-value tasks: mixing, mastering, reaching out to potential clients. So what about driving traffic and leads? Marketing yourself as an audio engineer will only yield results once you have a good handle on your mindset, ability, communication, positioning, workflows, and other aspects we've discussed so far. Once those essentials are in place, no matter how impressive your studio is or how great your work sounds, if no one knows you exist, you're not going to get hired. So how can you capture people's attention and convince them to work with you? Start by giving value freely. Someone who's never met or heard of you has no reason to give you their attention. You need to present them with a clear and enticing value proposition with no friction for them to receive it. You will then get all you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. An example: connect them with someone who could further their project. A great singer, A&R label, give them a free PDF with value information that can help them achieve their goals. Complimentary mix feedback. Whether you're giving away information, a free resource, or an online course, you want to be able to directly message them whenever you need to. So building an engaged mailing list is one of the best ways to stay top of mind with your customers. Once they're ready to order a service, you'll be their first thought. Giving value in exchange for your website visitors' email addresses is something you should put in place as soon as possible. Authenticate your email address to make sure your messages arrive, and sharing your best knowledge freely through social media, a blog, YouTube, will give you authority in your subject. This will give you an incredibly competitive edge as your readers will trust in your ability to deliver results. Creating content is time-consuming, but once it's on the web, it's there generating you leads forever. If people like you, they'll listen to you, but if they trust you, they'll do business with you. Search engines love trustworthy sites. They determine if a site is trustworthy by the number of quality links to it. A quality link can only come from another trustworthy site. So pitching high-quality guest blogs to trustworthy and relevant sites is the single most effective way to improve your ranking on search engines. Paid ads are a hit and miss. Some get great results, many frivolously waste money getting zero results. It's a rabbit hole that requires months of trial and error with no certainty of results. Retargeting adverts are more effective and less expensive than paying to generate cold leads. So this is where I'd recommend you start if you wanted to explore the ads option. Being present in the right circles is a great way to get gigs. Whether it's going to a networking event, going to live events, conventions, or even participating in online forums or social media groups, it all helps. The goal is to make meaningful connections that last, not to force feed your elevator pitch to everyone you meet. People work with people they like and trust. SoundBetter.com connects artists and service providers in the music industry. Like all good platforms, it rewards you for being a great provider. This means if you answer messages quickly, complete jobs successfully, and get hired repeatedly by the same clients, they push you up in the search rankings. It took me over a year to get momentum, but the energy and persistence paid off, as it's now a source that gives me a handful of leads every day, many of which I convert using the tactics that I'll share with you now. Sealing the deal is the final hurdle. The number one rule about selling is that you have to genuinely believe that it's in your customer's best interest to purchase from you. Your job is to help them understand that. Buying is an emotional thing, so focus your pitch on what your customer wants, not what they need. Keep your pitch concise, minimize distractions, and have very clear calls to action. To get momentum with your sales, start with an offer that's so good they would be stupid to turn it down. Here's an example pitch. Hey, I'm Tom. I'm committed to making your music sound amazing. I stand out from other mastering engineers with my unique ability to dramatically improve the sound of a mix. You'll see it in the reviews from my ecstatic customers. My ultimate goal is for you to be completely blown away with your mastered song. With thousands of successful projects under my belt, I'm confident that I can deliver the same incredible results for you. But I'm not satisfied until you are, so that's why I offer free revisions until we get your track perfect or your money back. I'm always happy to give feedback and suggestions to help you improve your mix if necessary. Let's work together to make your music the best it can be and set you up for a successful release. When speaking to or emailing a client, a few sales tactics can make the difference between getting the gig and losing a customer. You can avoid a tone that makes you sound even remotely desperate for the job. Please hire me, you won't regret it, is a huge turn-off for the client. So keep your cool and keep the focus on what they want. I'll be happy to work with you to get your track sounding its best for release. Little tip. Assume the sale. Don't tipper around whether they'll commit to your services or not. Be confident but not arrogant when communicating. If a decision needs to be made, don't give not buying as an option. Would you like to purchase stereo mastering or stem mastering? Is stronger than is one of our services right for you? Ask questions to understand and respond to any objections. Is your service too expensive? What are the negative effects of them not using your service or going for someone much cheaper? The price is high, but when you add the benefits of quality, subtract the disappointment of cheapness, multiply by the pleasure of releasing great music, and divide by the cost over the rest of your life, the arithmetic comes out in your favor. Use Grammarly, it's free. Make sure your writing is grammatically correct. Mistakes in writing could be perceived as a lack of attention to detail, an imperative quality in an audio engineer. Okay, so buying should be easy. Your customers should be able to pay as quickly and simply as possible. The last thing you want is a potential customer hiring someone else who had a more intuitive payment process. An advanced conversion tip: automatically show the currency of the customer based on their IP address. They shouldn't have to manually switch it. If you have people coming to your website from all over the world, showing your prices in the currency that they're familiar with will dramatically improve your conversion rate. Keep track of all the people who reach out to you. Life can get in the way and they'll forget to complete their order. Show that you care by reaching out in increasing intervals, so 24 hours after first contact, then day 3, day 10, day 24, etc. Keep following up with friendly messages until they either hire you or ask you to stop. If they're not quite ready to place the order, perhaps there's an element of the production which you could help them with. If they're struggling to record their vocal, send over a few tips or connect them with a studio near them. Be useful, give value, and keep following up to stay in their mind as someone they can trust. So now for everyone's favorite topic, finances. If your music studio is a business, then treat it like a business, not a side hustle or a hobby. Be honest with yourself about the numbers, taxes, purchases, and time that you spend working so your business can reach its fullest potential. You must know exactly how much money is coming in and going out. Planning for taxes, subscriptions, repairs, rainy days is only possible if you know exactly what's available. An unexpected large tax bill or overspending on anything will put a lot of pressure on your business. You'll get desperate for work and it will come across in your communication. You'll land fewer gigs, thus spiraling the business into failure. So, with that in mind, plan ahead. Know your expenses, set them aside each month. You'll have the peace of mind to focus your energy on working on and for your business. Be honest with yourself about how much you're actually working, how effective you're being. Note the hours you're at your computer every day and how much income you're generating. Try to reduce the amount of time it takes to generate the same money without compromising the service. Focus your time on the things that have the most disproportionately positive effects on your business. What about investing in gear? The amount of paid jobs that I have got because a client was impressed by my gear is a resounding 0. My setup only serves to help me get the best results possible. Invest in plugins and equipment that you're sure will give you a good return on investment. Make sure each purchase either saves you time or genuinely improves the quality of your work. 90% of my business expenses is software subscriptions that automate tasks to help me work more efficiently. The fastest way to grow your wealth is to live below your means. By paying off any debt, then building up your savings, you empower yourself to make better choices and invest in yourself. Try setting aside at least 10% of your monthly earnings after tax to be used in emergencies or investing. Create budgets and stick to them. Track what you spend your money on, write it down, or use a card linked to an app like Monzo or Starling, whatever. You'll see if there are aspects of your life where you're overspending. This will give you a mindset to analyze how you really feel about each purchase, both short and long term. Every single good financial decision compounds over time. After just a few months, you'll have more savings in the bank, more stability, and incredible peace of mind. Once you're on this trajectory, you'll be unstoppable. To conclude, don't forget to allocate time to work on your business as well as for your business. Working on your business pays dividends as it can actually have exponential positive effects in the future. Working for your business usually only brings in the income associated with that single service. Not all of these tips will be right and relevant in your business. Pick and choose what you feel is right for you to improve in your business at the stage you're at. Don't get overwhelmed. Do things in the right order to be effective. And remember, you will get all you want in life if you help enough people get what they want.